I'd just love to welcome Patrick Gallagher here from GridPane, founder and CEO of GridPane. And today's discussion is really about WordPress hosting, the options that are out there, what GridPane has done in the last however many years since what Patrick, 2018? Is that right? You're muted. Sorry,
yeah, sorry.
I muted
yeah, no worries. Yeah, February 1st, 2018 is when we launched publicly. And we now power over 100,000 websites, and we have customers in, I think, 117 countries now, which is pretty awesome because that has all happened 100% off the back of great word of mouth, which generally comes as a byproduct of our customer support and our community, I guess. So, and we'll touch on some of those things as we go through the questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, back when a lot of folks on the workshop here know that I have been making websites for clients since 1996. Then WordPress started in 2003, and I caught on in 2006. Really leveraging what all the developers had been doing for WordPress. Since it's open source software, you can do anything you want. It's free, right? And one of the things that I often kind of quote to myself and chuckle about, and sometimes post in this vein, is that the best thing about WordPress is that it's open source and free, and there's just so many options. You can do everything with it. And the worst thing about WordPress and why it sucks is because it's open source and there's so much stuff you can do with it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like there's so much that you do have to pick and choose your tools, And I think, Patrick, you and I had talked about this in the past, but over my career of hosting websites for clients and creating and managing those websites, I've moved upwards of 50 client websites 4 different times. And I went through the tiers that most of us go through when we start out. We don't have any money to spend. We might spring for some shared hosting at an inexpensive, possibly introductory cost, as far as what, paying a discounted rate for a whole year before that is going to jump up on you. And, a lot of times that comes unexpectedly after that year, and sure. As we talk about the kind of what I would say, I used to say 3 different kinds of hosting, I would just like to lay the foundation here for everybody on the call, old and new in my world. Some of this might be some repeat stuff, but, I used to think of kind of 3 kinds of WordPress hosting, and now I'm changing that to 4, honestly, and I'll explain real quick, and maybe you can give me your perspective on these tiers, Patrick, and see if you view it the same way I do. Number 1, sure. Shared hosting, right? Shared hosting, and I've done some clinics on this and some diagramming and such, but it really means that of course, a website has to sit on a server, which is a computer sitting somewhere in an air-conditioned data center, right? And just as foundational information for everyone, shared hosting means that the company that owns that server can put any number of websites on that single server, and they load up that server. And because of that, they can offer that very inexpensively. But also because of that, it ends up potentially causing some issues like what we call the noisy neighbor problem, right? The website that uses a lot of resources on that shared server can potentially affect the other sites on that server, and you never know who you're going to be next to, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, the name of the game in shared hosting is density, okay? And that's just as many butts in seats as humanly possible. And so you can picture, a theater and they have 3,000 seats to sell. Well, in a shared hosting environment, like they'll fill all 3,000 of those seats, and then they'll start bringing out folding chairs, and they'll just pack them in wherever they can.
Sold out show.
They would stack people on top of each other if they could. And that's generally what they end up doing. And so that's why if you have a very low traffic website, you don't really notice that you're crammed into this environment. But anytime you start dealing with dynamic workloads or lots of traffic, lots of WooCommerce checkouts, like you learn very, very quickly that a shared environment is not the right place for you. So,
Yeah, and I learned that the hard way by discovering that that I had noisy neighbors, which were like my own clients being neighbors with each other. I actually had a funny situation at Media Temple where on my shared server, the email box, and of course, this is not a best practice anymore, right? Hosting email at the same server where you have your website hosted. Keep those things separate for redundancy, right? But anyway, long story short, the email box filled up and all of my client sites went down. Because that one problem, right? And I went into panic mode, right, for 12 hours, of course, and figured it out. But in any case, let's go to that second level. That I call the second level would be managed WordPress hosting, right? This is where you still don't have complete transparency about what your server is, what resources it actually has, but managed WordPress hosting, depending on what you buy and who you go with, has some parallels with shared hosting, right? But they're a little more transparent with what resources they give you, but you still don't know where your server is located, what resources it has. When I talk about managed WordPress hosting, a lot of the names that come to mind are, companies like Kinsta and Flywheel and WP Engine. And, I did move to, I really respect Flywheel and what they had done when they started at the time a few years ago. When I moved clients to their service, it was pretty great. One of the great things about managed WordPress hosting is good support, right? And them being able to take care of some of the things at a server level that you might not get with a real shared house, like security concerns and mitigation and that kind of thing. And so that's kind of, level number 2 in what I've always thought of as 3 levels of WordPress hosting, And so what do you have to say about how kind of GridPane compares to that managed WordPress hosting level? You kind of I think of GridPane and others as that third level, sort of what we've learned to call self-managed in a way.
Yeah, so that's really what we are is self-managed WordPress, where you have all of the same kind of tooling that you're used to getting with a managed environment. So you have things like backups and updates and security and performance caching and staging and all of these things. And you have really, really good support available to you. But then what we allow you to do is sort of own the actual infrastructure layer underneath that. Okay. And so one of the biggest sort of fundamental shifts that people need to understand is that when you're hosted at Kinsta, when you're hosted at Flywheel, when you're hosted at WP Engine, you're not actually hosted with any of those people. You're actually hosted with Google Compute Engine, okay, which is the competing service, huge multi-billion-dollar competing service to Amazon Web Services, okay?
Yeah, and let me interrupt for one quick second, just to define that word infrastructure. Really, what that means is the actual physical server where your site is hosted. Just for everybody on the call, when you say you at GridPane you own your infrastructure, that's actually a separate purchasing relationship to those infrastructure providers. With your actual server, you actually own and pay for that separately than your access to GridPane. Isn't that right?
Yeah, correct. So the another popular one out there is Cloudways. And the way that Cloudways' model works is they basically take infrastructure at DigitalOcean, infrastructure at Vultr, infrastructure at AWS and GCP, and they more or less sort of double the price, the retail price that you would be paying if you went straight to those providers, and they tack on a little bit more margin on top of that, and then they manage the server for you. But really, all that means is that they install a hardware stack, just a hardware and software stack, just like we do at GridPane. But we want you to actually own that relationship direct with the infrastructure provider themselves, so that you have better unit economics, so that there's better transparency. Like one of the primary complaints that people have on all hosting plans of all types is you run into a problem, and then they basically, the customer support person on the other end says, well, the solution to the problem is just upgrade, just go up to the next plan up. Whereas in our world, if we tell you to go up to the next server, we have no financial incentive to do so, because you own that relationship direct with AWS or Google or Vultr or whoever it is. And so if we tell you to get a bigger server, it's because you actually need a bigger server. And so that's that honesty and that transparency is one of the things that people very much like with us, because we have no reason to tell you to do that other than, you can either fix your code base or you can pay more money on infrastructure, but get larger servers. So you decide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Patrick. Because, and that kind of illustrates what I think of as the fourth kind. I've kind of in my mind, I've slipped this fourth kind of WordPress hosting in there, which Cloudways qualifies as. Let me review. You've got shared hosting, right? Then you've got managed hosting, full managed, like Flywheel, WP Engine. You have GridPane, which is a self-managed, but you own the relationship. But in my mind, sitting in between those two, here is Cloudways. They're allowing you to choose, okay, I want to use Vultr, or I want to use Google, or I want to use Linode, or whatever the server provider is, but you have to pay Cloudways for that. Cloudways marks that up, Cloudways buys that, and you don't have direct access to upgrade your own server outside of the company owner, like Cloudways, for example. And so that I feel is kind of, I used to just lump that in with self-managed hosting. But what you don't have is that transparency. And what I've really loved about GridPane since I started, I think it was like 2019, when I found you guys, and I was like, woohoo, finally, is that transparency and eliminating the financial incentive for you as my hosting control panel provider and support provider for just like making me upgrade to the next plan whenever it suits you, whether I need it or not.
Sure. Right. Yeah, sure. Exactly. Well, and another thing that's sort of interesting is what we've learned over the years is that the self-managed moniker is kind of a double entendre, because in a lot of ways people hear that and they see what it is that you can do with our platform and they think, oh no, I have to manage all of these servers now. Like I'm in charge of all of these servers. And in a lot of ways, what we mean by self-managed is that it does manage itself. Okay.
Yes.
And so, you own that relationship and these are your boxes. You can turn them on, you can turn them off, you can light yourself on fire if you want to. But generally speaking, people ask me all the time, like, what if I don't know anything about servers? And my answer is always the same. And it is, don't ever touch them. Just literally don't ever touch them. Like let our platform spin them up for you. And then just don't poke the bear, just let them do their thing, So,
well, I love that. That's like a redefining of that word self, right? You aren't the self, you just let it manage itself. And I'll tell you,
it's like self-driving, self-driving. Of course, AI is all the rage right now.
Right.
And we are integrating certain tools like that to help with support and to help, automatic remediation of things. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it does all that, it does so much of the heavy lifting for you without you having to really understand what's happening under the hood. But obviously what we want to do is encourage people to know as much as possible, because a lot of what it is that people are paying for, they think that they're paying for great support at these providers like Kinsta or WP Engine. In a lot of ways, they're just paying a tax to not know what is actually going on underneath the scenes, or behind the scenes. In like WP Engine is selling you a black box, and they try very, very hard for you to not know what actually lives inside there, and they try very hard to charge you as much as humanly possible for what lives in that box. And we have no financial incentive to do any of that, and so we want you to see what you have. We want you to understand what it is that you're seeing, because that's just going to make you a better freelancer, developer, a better, purveyor of WordPress sites and services,
Yeah, for me, I'll tell you that I was enamored at the beginning with the fact that, first of all, I could get my own servers and choose the size. And we'll get into my kind of third question. I do have a second question. The topic we're talking about right now is the four kinds of WordPress hosting. And I have kind of two other topics before we finish up. I only want to go an hour today. But as far as my experience, first, owning that server and being able to choose the size, knowing the resources that I'm using, and the features within the GridPane server stack and control panel to be able to seamlessly upgrade, downgrade, clone sites from one server to another for my purposes whenever I need to, and it's like for me, that here, let me sorry, I got interrupted. Just going to click the mute all for everyone. For me, the being able to get in there and to quote you, light myself on fire, the possibility to be able to do that. I can understand how that is there. Like I could delete things and whatnot. However, the you know, and me not knowing anything about system administration, the software stack on top of you know, that GridPane is using to power all of this and to power my, I like knowing what it is, but I don't know how it works, and I don't need to. And one of the things that I always look for in my 4 moves, you know, from host to host with 50 client sites and doing all those migrations, that sounds like a pain in the ass, right? But it was well worth it. Every time that I moved, I looked for somewhere as a non-technical, non-system administrator or server admin, knowing that I'd have somebody had my back, you know, that there was some help. You know, at GridPane, the amazing knowledge base, the documentation is such that I've been able to get in there and even use the command line and learn that stuff to be able to get some really deep data on, okay, what site is taking up all the space on this one server right now, or why is the RAM memory high at the moment? So easy to follow. And then immediate one-on-one help inside my Developer Plus account is welcome, though I never use it. And of course, there's the community forum too. Sure. Exactly what you said, Patrick. I you know, it's not really that I'm the self-managing all my client sites and all of my student sites on my GridPane servers and all the different servers that I have. It manages itself. I kind of like to call it set it and forget it right now.
Yep.
Because it kind of does that. It does it all for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we built the platform. So just as a little bit of context that I don't imagine your audience will have. So I ran my own marketing technology consultancy for 13 years before I ultimately went all in on GridPane, and I used every single terrible host on the face of the planet, and including some actually all the way up to some really, really good ones. Like that, it was the second time that I canceled WP Engine that I decided, you know, to hell with it. I need to solve this problem for my customers and for myself. And so I started investing in building the tools that ultimately would become GridPane. And so I needed something that would make it very, very easy for my team to be able to do some of the server specific tasks that I was capable of doing, because I have sort of a traditional computer science background. I've been a total nerd for pretty much all my life, but I had great people on my team that knew WordPress really well. There were great salespeople. There were great customer service people. But if I said, "Hey, I need you to go spin up a server in Dallas," they would go, "I don't know what you're talking about," you know. And so I needed the ability to just have them be able to go in and click 3 buttons and have those things happen. And so we like to say, if you can find something inside of GridPane that takes more than 3 clicks, then you've probably found a bug. Okay. And so, that's not 100% true right out of the gate. Like generally there's a little bit more to it the first time you're going to do any one thing. But literally like spinning up a server is a matter of just naming it, picking where you want it to be and picking a price and then hitting go, you know, and then building your sites. You have a lot more flexibility there in terms of how you want to handle SSLs, how you want to handle DNF, how you want to handle SMTP, you know, integrations, things like that. But again, once you set those things one time, you literally can just deploy that same, you know, all of those same settings again and again and again. And it's just literally as few steps as possible. We want everything in the platform to be as obvious, and we want the defaults to be really, really sane for as many use cases as possible. And so that's what we've strived to build over the last 6 years.
I've loved it. It's been awesome. For me, it's been you can set up a server that's so small, I should say, it's, you know, as far as the resources and space, storage space, RAM, memory, and CPU, you can set up one that's so small, $20 a month or less, right? Among different providers, anywhere all across the world. And as you put sites onto that, it's amazing. More than even the shared hosts that are super cheap. I can get my per host hosting costs down like to $1.
Yeah.
In extreme cases for just basic sites. But
Yeah.
by the same token, I can choose to take that $20 a month server and I can make it exclusive to one client. And then,
Yep.
oh boy, now they have a totally private, non-shared environment that can expand even at that low cost per month for that infrastructure. That can hold a learning management system with logins, a WooCommerce site where there's concurrent users at the same time, those kinds of things. And I mean, as as the traffic might ratchet up, as the business gets more successful, it is so easy for me to say, okay, oh, I got to spin up a server that's a little double the size now. And of course, those infrastructure providers charge you per minute or not per month, right? So you can like spin one up, move the site over with the GridPane one-click cloning, shut down the other server, and I'm done. And I've like doubled my storage, my RAM memory that was needed. All that stuff is so awesome. And as we move, let me ask you about, let's get a little technical here.
Sure.
We won't get too far in the weeds, but I've heard you explain this before, and I'd love the listeners today to hear the idea of the PHP workers tax, as you've talked about it, and how GridPane is different in that way, as far as what that is. We might all know that PHP is the programming language that WordPress is built on, and that it's a dynamic language that causes our WordPress sites to be able to serve multiple users, do logins, all that kinds of stuff. But there's something called PHP workers that every hosting provider has to have, right? Can you teach a little bit and kind of enlighten us here?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, can you change it so that I can share my screen?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Here. I need to make host. Okay. Should have popped up for you now.
Yeah, cool. So can we see this screen here?
Yes.
Choose
looks
the best
like we can all see
plan.
it. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, cool. So this is Kinsta. Kinsta is, in my opinion, one of the better traditional managed WordPress hosts. Okay. And this is just their basic pricing for their sort of agency centric pricing for WordPress. And so on their lowest plan, you're paying $35 for one site, and you have 2 PHP workers available to you. Okay. As you go up all the way to Enterprise 4, now you have 150 sites on this plan. So you're trending towards like $12-ish, I guess, per site, or $11 per site, something like that.
Yep.
And now you actually have 14 PHP workers. Okay. And so you can see, all these ranges in between. We've seen a lot of scenarios in which people would come to us from Kinsta and they would have a 60 site plan, for example, and they'd be spending over $600 a month because they had one WooCommerce website that needed 8 PHP workers. Okay. And so again, as Greg said, WordPress itself runs on top of PHP. It is built in the PHP programming language. And when you're running your hosting anywhere on the planet, it doesn't matter whether you're at GoDaddy, you're at GridPane, anything in between, when you are doing things that are dynamic on the server. So you could imagine, like, if you're all developers, when you log into the server and you're now making edits on the site itself, you're actually consuming one of these PHP workers. Okay. Like your logged in user, your browser is consuming one of these workers. So if your client is logged in also, well, now both of these workers are being consumed. And if I, the visitor, want to come to your website and transact on your website, so I add something into the cart, the instant that I go to actually check out, well, now I need a PHP worker too. because I'm also doing something dynamic with the server. And so the reason that they don't recommend this site recommended for e-commerce and membership sites, the reason they don't recommend any of these tiers, these first two tiers, is because you've only got 2 PHP workers on a site. And so they don't recommend for e-commerce anything lower than 4 PHP workers, because what that gives you is basically you could have one person logged in working on the site. You could potentially have another client that's logged in that's working on the inventory of the site. They're adding items into the inventory. And you could theoretically have actual live concurrent checkouts happening right now in real time. And so long as you didn't need more than 2 people checking out in any short window of time, any few second window of time, then you're going to be okay. But if you have a site where you might have, dozens of people trying to transact with your site at the exact same time, now you have to go in to these much, much higher worker counts. And we know people that are running multiple thousands of dollars per month, single sites on these large scale hosts. And when you run the exact same thing in the GridPaint environment, you might only need to spend $40, $80, $100 or something like that. Like I think you're running roughly $150 or $200 gaming server right now, Greg, for your very large, site that couldn't even run at all at WP Engine,
Right.
And it's like you have literally dozens of CPU, you have dozens of PHP workers available to you on that hardware. And this is just a tax that we don't charge people. Like this is a completely arbitrary tax that they're charging people. And so they've already got you on this vertical. They've already got you on the number of sites. They've already got you on the number of visitors. They've already got you on the amount of storage. They've already got you on the amount of bandwidth. And now they get you with this yet another tax that they're able to all of these ones let them take one of your eyes out. This one lets them take the other eye out, And so I tend to, I don't want to harp too much just on any one host here, but this is just yet another angle that a lot of people get kind of raked over the coals on pricing, and we just don't have that in our world. Like we don't have any arbitrary PHP limits. What we do is we train you to understand that if you have arbitrarily, let's say 4 CPU threads in your server, you go and you buy 4 CPUs from Vultr, and you're spending $40 a month on that. That's loosely equivalent to 12 PHP workers. And so, yeah, you're spending $40 to get $1,300 worth of hosting at an equivalent, a literal equivalent experience. And we're just as performant, we're just as secure, we're just as, as reliable as these other options. And you can literally choose a box exactly where Kinsta is hosting. Because again, Kinsta is hosting all of this stuff at Google Compute Engine. So if you want to be able to tell yourself a story that it's like, I'm doing as close to an apples to apples comparison as I possibly can, then just spin up a Google Compute Engine server at Google in the same data center where you're hosting it at Kinsta, but run it on GridPaint, and then just look at the delta of the monies that you're saving. That's what we make it possible for you to do.
Yeah, and you alluded to that example. I'd love to just illustrate for anybody on the call that hasn't heard this story yet about my WP Engine experience. WP Engine is a great company, and they have great support, and their interface is easy to use. But the story that Patrick alluded to, you guys, was with my Udemy course, and I have a multi-site setup, multiple ones now, sandboxes where if you're my student, you've probably gone in there and gotten your own site, and of course you've had to log in and to be able to use that and follow my lessons and build your sites. But we were talking about hosting upwards of 2, 3, almost 4,000 sites at once on one server. With that happening, I had moved that system to WP Engine in the hopes of getting, of course, good support, but really good amount of resources available to me, so everything would run fast, backups would complete, and everything. And for that many sites on WP Engine, my cost was about $1,200 a month. And
Yep.
The backups couldn't complete. The server that I was on was not powerful enough to actually do everything that was needed, even at that price. And they couldn't solve it. The only solution they had was upgrade twice the price, and it'll run fast, you know. And I was like,
Yeah, sure.
right. And then I found GridPane. Oh man. And I'm running the same system. You it's an OVH is another provider that can be used. It's a large server. I wouldn't put just one basic brochure site on it, but it's $145 a month. And
Yep.
it runs everything and more than what I was getting at WP Engine for $1,200. And so, I mean, it's just a kind of a crazy difference when you're not stuck and when you can know what you have as far as the server power and resources. Well, then you can arrange it for what you need. And then the modularity of, like I said, with cloning and the staging areas and being able to do that within the GridPane control panel, it's just so good.
Yeah. So here's another example is, again, we don't care about visits because it's like, whatever, just use the bandwidth that you have available to you. But they're saying for 150 sites with 250 gigabytes of storage and 6 terabytes of bandwidth on the CDN, if we jumped over to Vultr, literally 6 CPUs is safely 18 workers would be available to you. Plenty of RAM. 5 terabytes of direct bandwidth, 320 gigabytes of storage, so more storage, more workers, and the hard infrastructure cost is $80 retail, okay? And the exact same thing that they're selling over here is $1,650.
Yeah.
You know? And so I mean, it's literally, when people see these kinds of like 10x, 20x markups, it's like, yeah, you think that's depressing. Guess what they're actually paying?
Oh,
they're not paying anything close. They're not paying anything close to retail because they're not paying anything close to this price at GCP because they're buying so much from Google. Okay. And they're running long sustained use agreements and contracts, and they're negotiating their rates down. And so we're not looking at gross 95% margins here. We're looking at gross 99% margins generally. And so it's like, that's, I think that we can run very, very healthy margins, turning around and selling hosting services to people where we can have a $20 box that we're charging someone $200 for. That's perfectly fine because they're not going to get anything close to that if they spend the exact same amount of money at Kinsta, And so in a lot of ways, what we want to do, and this has become more and more clear to us over time, like, I don't know where your users are around the world. I imagine a lot of them are in the United States.
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
About half. And then I have students in 192 countries.
That's awesome. That's
in the US.
Yeah. So for those of you in the United States, this time of year, it depends on where you are, obviously, geographically. But this time of year in Michigan, they've firmly gone from the snowblowers are right inside the door and they're out front to now it's the lawnmowers are out in front of Home Depot. And when you go inside the Home Depot, it's grills. Yeah. That's what's immediately visible inside of all of the Home Depots. Okay. And so what I like to think about is this analogy of when you're shopping for different hosting solutions, you're looking at grills in a Home Depot. Okay. And so Kinsta's over here and it has this many BTUs, and then WP Engine's over there, and that's the Weber, and it has like the skillet and the flat iron, and it has all these different options. And so you have all of these different options to make charred meat. Okay. In a lot of ways, what it is that GridPane has done is not created an alternative to hosting in that context. Like what we've done is we've made it possible so that you can become McDonald's. Okay. And so that's what we want to install in your head. Is not a different grill. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. Like all of these things make grilled meat, and they can knock the hamburgers out for you, and that's great. But the real value of what it is that McDonald's creates is not the burgers. It's that they have the entire process and the brand, so that you can just say, "I want to open a McDonald's right here," and it just prints money for you. Okay, and that's really what we want people to see and have that shift. in their thinking is, I don't want you to think of GridPane as an alternative to Kinsta. What I want you to think about when you think about GridPane is I want you to think about recurring revenue, because that is what it is that we help you create. Because we make it possible for you to say, yeah, don't use Kinsta, use my thing. And the reason you want to use my thing is because I've partnered with GridPane, and GridPane allows me to do this, and this, so that you can get back to work doing your chiropractic thing, or you can get back to work running your yoga studio, or whatever it is that your client's, zone of genius is. We want to make this a thing that you can make available to them at very, very high margins, that you can sleep well at night knowing that you have very robust and reliable systems behind the scenes. But yeah, we want people to be thinking about this as not a cost center and not an alternative. It's a revenue driver in your business. And it's something that just far too many agency and freelancers don't do a good job of thinking about. They're so transactional trying to get the website deal done that they don't think about the fact that it's like, you actually want to be thinking about what is the recurring revenue that's going to come to me from this customer, and how important that is in driving better enterprise value for whatever your thing is,
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It totally does. And to me, that's exactly what I felt like I was ready to plug into. It was like, as I needed to expand my hosting resources before GridPane, I wasn't sure, right? Like taking on more clients didn't necessarily mean more profit, because I had to expand my resources. And then I was going from 1,200 a month to 400 a month, or I mean, it becomes kind of untenable. Whereas by controlling my relationship with the infrastructure, the actual servers are like, hey, that's up to me. GridPane doesn't make any extra money when I need to expand, and that's an advantage to me. Not that I don't want my supporters to make money. What you offer me and what GridPane offers me is the software stack, which is like fastest, highest performance WordPress performance on the server. Plus the experts are there in my back pocket when needed, although hardly ever needed.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is when they look at our different offerings, and they see, we have a completely free plan. Literally, people can just get spun up and build up to 25 sites, and they don't even have to give us their credit card, all the way up to plans that start at $18,000 a year. When we're having that $18,000 a year conversation, that is when someone is coming to us generally from one of these Kinsta environments. They're spending, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month on hosting already. And what they want is they want us to actually build an entire hosting division for them. Yeah. And so the plans that we have literally let everybody sort of participate at any budget and at any level. Like the person that wants our thing that starts at $18,000, they don't fundamentally want something different than what somebody wants that has $100 to spend today. What they want is speed. And then what they want to be able to do is say, yeah, I don't even want to think about customer support. I don't want to even think about management of the servers. I want all of those notifications to go to you. I want you guys watching my stuff 24/7. And so we have those more premium offerings for larger agencies that are already spending well in excess of that amount of money, who want to be able to say, not only do I want to change my thinking and move, but I want you guys to just make all of these decisions for me. Yeah. And whereas the person that's at just a totally free plan, you can just take baby steps, and learn over time, or, the more and more, the higher you go with your spending with us, the more you sort of are shortcutting the learning curve, and you're shortcutting the time to value or your time to market. And you're also capitalizing on just better access to our senior developers, our senior engineers, closer access to the real roadmap of the most advanced things that we're building. But again, we've got something that fits for everybody in between 0 all the way to, very large scale agencies and large scale enterprise.
Yeah, and for me and my students, that road is not invisible, and it's not blocked in any way. And I can actually, when you say, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, everybody here in the Zoom, their eyes just glazed over and went, that's
Yeah,
not me. But
yeah,
however,
right.
right, including me. However, I'm like, I've grown to the point where it's like, not that I've grown. I came in with just a few less than 100 customers, right? But
Yep.
I'm able to take advantage of what all those higher end customers need if I'm willing to just take a little bit of learning and configuration. It's not even learning how to do anything, honestly, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's like GridPan gives me the control panel. In fact, let me share my screen a little bit as we kind of wrap up our
Yeah,
conversation, Patrick.
sure.
Oops, I got to take back. I was going to say that, it's really, I'm going to reclaim host of Zoom. Okay.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
I'll share my screen and just, here, let me just real quick as I prattle on. Can you guys see that? You can see my screen, Patrick?
It's starting. Yep. I see 1243 and a lighthouse.
Yeah. 1243. Of course, I'm not logged in and all that yet. Hang on. Oh no, I am logged in. Haha. So I'm just gonna go into my GridPan account, and I really just wanted to look at kind of a sample site. Check this out. I got greg.com, but it's a 3 instead of an E.
That's nice. Yeah. That's
Anyway,
good. That's
I don't
good.
use it for anything yet. But I just clicked on the name of this site. It tells me the IP address and the name that I've named my server for this little play site. But I was going to say that I feel I have all the tools that I need to be able to set up anything up to even those big corporate executive businesses that need it, or big agencies or web agencies that are bigger than me that host thousands of client sites. I can still do everything, here inside of GridPan, I wanted to just highlight cloning, backups, and a little bit about security, Patrick, as we wrap up. And then talk about that panel plan for this week. But like, for example, if I go over to Clone here, this is just a favorite of mine lately because I tend to instead of having one big server for all of my clients and that's basically shared hosting, right? I have smaller servers all lined up. Like if you look at my servers page, just briefly, this is the number of servers I have running. Some are client servers and some are like for some others of my clients. I generally keep them on the smaller side. I fill them up to 20 or 30 websites, or even less for the ones that are more dynamic. And I could just move things around at will. If I go back to just the control screen for greg.com here, if I go to Clone, I could say, okay, I want to make another copy of this site on, with the same exact domain name, and I want to move it over to my other server, not this server, but right over here in this. I click this blue button. I just made a copy in like 2 minutes, and then I can shut down the other site. I can really move my resources around. You guys, I know Patrick, you know this, but I'm kind of teaching everybody here that hasn't really seen behind the curtain here a little bit.
Yeah. So the one thing that's sort of interesting is, and one of the things I think is most valuable, you mentioned our knowledge base. Like we literally have invested over $150,000 in creating that knowledge base over the last 5+ years. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, it is a PhD in learning all of these things. Like you can go as far down this rabbit hole as you want to go with us. Yep. But you don't have to learn all of these things. Okay. And, but what I think ends up happening is by being more and more exposed to this platform, to the documentation, to the community that has sprung up around GridPan, it's a natural forcing function on you just becoming so much better at just understanding the internet in general, but obviously WordPress itself very, very narrowly, And so I see these things happen every single day, like where I saw somebody that they were talking about, they were developing locally inside of local WP, and they deleted a bunch of pages, and they deleted the deletes, and they emptied the trash, and they did all of these things, and they completely lit themselves on fire. And I just think, well, man, if you had GridPane hourly backups on, like, you can do hyper destructive things to yourselves, and we still make it possible for you to basically like go back in time and just undo the big mistakes, like, and this is what I want people to get so fluent and so comfortable with, is that it's like, we hear people all the time that they talk about like, oh man, I'm going to have to migrate these sites. And it's like, and like, literally, we make it so possible, so easy for you to say, well, I'm at Vulture right now, and they're all hosted in Chicago, and for whatever reason, let's say Vulture just is pissing you off. They're becoming unreliable, and you don't like Vulture anymore. Okay, well then just spin up a new server in DigitalOcean and in New York City, and then click like 3 buttons, and it'll clone every single site over to that other server, and then run one batch update of your DNS records inside of Cloudflare, and you're done. Like, literally, the amount of human like hand-holding and the amount of actual lift, like the cognitive load of moving 100 sites inside of our platform, I've literally just described it. It is click, 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 go get coffee, and then as fast as the computer can compress the files and send them over fiber optic cables, that is how fast those sites are going to get moved. And so Greg is one of the power users on our platform now that knows that when it's like, oh, I need to move a site, it's like completely trivial to do so, and a lot of people, like, they get into this, they grind their teeth and they think, oh God, what am I going to do? And it's like, just move the site. It's literally as trivial as, oh, how are we going to get this? How are we going to convert this bread into toast? It's like, well, we got the 4-slice machine right over there. We just put the bread in there, and then that's that, And so a lot of these kinds of what we consider to be completely basic functions are very, very difficult to do, even in other managed environments, like the way that we allow people to do staging, the way that we allow people to do granular staging, the way that we allow people to recover backups from a different server, from a server you deleted 2 months ago, like things that other hosts just can't even do. They're just totally formulaically easy inside of our platform, and part of that is because of how open we made it. We sort of shot ourselves in the foot in a lot of ways, because the managed environments at Kinsta and WP Engine, their answer to all kinds of questions is just no. Like, oh, can I run this extra software? Like, I've got a WooCommerce site that does 7 figures a month, but then I also have 3 physical locations in Dallas, and I've got a complex inventory management system that talks to an ERP, this and that. At Kinsta, they just go, no, you can't do any of that. The answer is no. For any amount of money, the answer is no. Mm-hmm. And in our world, it's not only is the answer yes, but it's, yeah, here's the documentation. Go knock yourself out. Go and do that complex thing, because we've had to solve for that use case, And so once we've gotten enough demand for any esoteric thing like that, we just went, yeah, there you go. Like, yes, you can do that.
And what I love, I'll never have to do like weird migrations, downloading the entire site, like a 2 gigabyte site to my home computer in order to upload it to another server somewhere. What a pain. And a lot of migration fails over the years, but this is so easy. The backups too, Patrick. The backups, I know, just briefly, just for everyone here on the call, without knowing how it all works, these backups break themselves into chunks and save themselves in a way that doesn't use up very much space at all on the server, wherever you have it stored. And at the same time, it also does intelligent backup, re-backups and subsequent backups, where it doesn't save things over and over and over and over again and take up a bunch of space. It only saves what has changed. And what I'd like to do, I don't on this Sandbox site, but I have local backups that saves my backup onto the same server, but then remote backups can save this to a different provider that I can choose, and I can do these backups. I can do these backups, as frequently as hourly. I could choose different rates, and I like to have, like, as a rock climber, and when you build an anchor that you're hanging from ropes and you need to make sure you don't die on the cliff, you need redundancy, right? And this is so that your website cannot die. I like to have a local backup, a remote backup, and then a plugin on the site that does a secondary remote backup. I have backups of backups, and all here so easy.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that we've, just our intellectual property around backups, like we built an entire company's worth of infrastructure and intellectual property just in that context, because we wanted to be able to say that we had the definitive answer to the problem, and so as Greg alluded to, like what we have is the most complex. Let me see if I get this right. It's incremental, deduplicated, encrypted, compressed backups. Okay. And so what this means is that you can picture, let's say you have 50 websites on your server. Well, each one of those websites is running WordPress itself. Okay. What's known as the core files. Well, so long as all of those core files are the same, which they should be, then we actually only need one copy of core, because every single other one, we back up the first site and we go, then when we get to the second site, we go, well, that's core. I've already got those chunks. So I'll just make a reference to those chunks. So now what you can picture is that as your footprint of your sites increases, it can increase exponentially, but the size of your backups actually only increases logarithmically. So it starts to taper off, because the only thing that's going in there is file and data changes. That is, your client has uploaded a new picture, so we only grab the new picture. But if you have, like, all of your sites are running Elementor, you only back up one copy of Elementor. And so long as Elementor doesn't change, you only back up the changed Elementor that comes when they drop a new version, okay? Yeah. And a lot of places just don't do that stuff. They do complete snapshots of things. Well, I have to worry about people in developing economies who don't have the money to waste on backups, even when they're pennies on the dollar, And so that's why it is that we've integrated so many different providers, and we've made it so possible to go down to such a granular level that so many other people would just say, I don't even care. Like, it doesn't matter. Just back up 50 copies. It's like, well, no, that's objectively wrong. Yeah. And so so many times we look at things and we look at it as, is this logically the best way to do it? And if the answer is no, then we don't do it that way. And so that of course means that we're highly opinionated, and we can and do rub people the wrong way with those opinions. But we're trying to be able to look ourselves at the end of the day, be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, we built the best tool for the job because it's what it is that we needed for ourselves, And so a lot of that passion goes into all the decisions that we make and what it is that we build and what it is that we put out into the world.
Yeah, that is so awesome. I feel I'm just, it's interesting to know how all that stuff works, but I feel the benefit of not needing to know that, and just that it works, and that, the Gridbane control panel offers me buttons that are pretty intuitive that I can just get in there and do and set up. And again, set it and forget it is, when I set up a new site, you can also, inside of Gridbane, you can create blueprint websites. So those of you that are web designers and are making sites for clients, or multiple sites, you could build everything as far as even plugins and themes that you use, or builders that you use that have license keys and everything to them. You can make a blueprint that just makes itself as you want as soon as you spin up a new site. Those kinds of things are the things that I feel in my business that mean a lot,
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it, like, so we have both bundles, which is, you can imagine that being a collection of all the themes and plugins that you might want to install. But then to your next example, like, what we highly recommend is that people build sort of what I refer to as a boilerplate. Okay. And so you might have, let's say you have customers in real estate, but they're in sort of 3 different segments. Okay. Like, maybe you have fixer upper investor real estate clients, you have sort of luxury residential real estate clients, and then you have say commercial multifamily, like apartments. Okay. You may have 3 separate boilerplates for those customer segments that you're serving. And then when you get a new client in that regard, like, oh, I found a new broker, she sells homes in Okemos where Patrick lives, you can go and clone that existing boilerplate that has all, not just all the themes and the plugins but it has all the settings and it has all the data as well. And so when you log in to that site with our single sign-on, which is just one button, you're already 25 hours into a custom build for that client. And now you're just dropping in logos and you're just dropping in their particular marketing collateral. And you're not worrying about all the decisions that you made the last time you went way down the rabbit hole. You're just taking what could have been a $15,000 project that you sold to somebody in Orlando last year. And now you're just cookie cutter stamping it out again for somebody in Colorado, that also sells high-end homes there, you know, and now you're just changing out media and you're accelerating the rate at which you can get the customer to that value, again, with as few clicks as possible inside our dashboard.
And so it's a tool to quote Kevin Geary, about don't do anything twice, right? Don't repeat yourself. The dry philosophy.
Exactly.
Never repeat yourself. Like if you find yourself doing something more than once or over and over again, figure out a way to have that automatically done first, because it has to happen for each job. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy how many times we'll see people, we're at a level now where our support requests, we know that 97% of them are going to be something completely external to us. It's not going to be a problem with our platform. It's going to be Vulture's data center in Chicago is down, or it's going to be something like that, where we can just go and say, yeah, that's not us. That's that thing over there. That's that thing over there. But the other thing that we're finding is that we're in such diminishing returns territory, even for feature requests. Okay. And so like we had somebody recently that was asking us like, why don't you build this thing? And my answer back to them was like, well, that's already well solved by plugins that are infinitely flexible. Like the specific request was somebody was asking about, they wanted to be able to use a specific SMTP provider. And for those of you who don't know, that's to handle email. Okay. SMTP relates to transactional email on your servers. And so you like password resets, or the customer gets an email sent to them that's the receipt for the thing that they bought. That's SMTP transactional email. The most popular one is probably SendGrid, which we do natively integrate with, but there's a ton of them. Like there's 24 major players out there, and everybody wants us to integrate all of them, of course, because everybody has their favorite. Well, almost every single one of them has a really good plugin and it already works, And so you can have that running on your existing client site, and then you can just clone that. And so when you go to build another site, it's literally just there and running and working already. And this person was asking, and they're like, yeah, but I don't like, this is how my workflow is. I go through and I build the sites, and then I select the SMTP provider. And it was just like, why are you doing that extra step when actually what you should do is just be cloning what you know to be the most complete version of the thing, as like all the way to that last mile, that crucial last mile, which is going to be that customer's data, that customer's logos, that customer's styling. But all of the work that you did months or years before now can just be immediately leveraged and just stamped and put to good use. And so, yeah, that don't repeat yourself is so essential. And so we try as much as we can now to just ask ourselves, should we even build that thing? Because we're already so far down the rabbit hole in so many contexts, right. That it just increasingly the answer is, yeah, why would we build that? That's already,
that makes sense.
That's already done. It's already done, and it's already done in a good way, another way.
Right, a better way even.
That's part of our job. That's part of our job is opening people's eyes to better workflows and better capability, and more time savings, Yeah,
and then I opened up the chat, and I do see, thanks for all the highs, everyone. Giovanni asks, does GridPane offer domain names? And this is a good place to interject this. And GridPane does not offer domain names, nor should they. This is a place where a best practice would be, no, get your domain name from a dedicated domain registrar, a top-level domain registrar, and point that domain to the GridPane server. And that is a best practice. So I would imagine you would nod and agree when I say GridPane will never be a domain registrar. That's a totally
I doubt it. I mean, I doubt it. The biggest, I mean, of course, there is an argument to be made that it's like we're leaving some money on the table. But like, even if people were buying hundreds or even thousands of domains every single month, that's either hundreds or thousands of dollars. That, you know, maybe, yeah, thousands of dollars is nothing to shake a stick at. But it's just not really an area of focus for us. And as Greg said, I recommend that people go and buy domains from Google and even from GoDaddy. I don't recommend having your DNS at GoDaddy, but if there's a great special at Namecheap or GoDaddy or wherever the hell it is, that's perfectly fine. What I recommend is having multiple different registrars in different places. I buy most of my domains through Google, but I have dozens of domains that I bought at GoDaddy, and I'm perfectly fine with them still being there, because then I use DNS someplace else. I have some of my DNS at Cloudflare. I have some of my DNS at DNS Made Easy. I have some of my DNS at Google. I want to spread these things around so that I have no single point of failure. Okay. Yes. So if for some reason this is obviously, I've never seen this happen, but let's say for some reason that GoDaddy has a change in mindset or a change in heart, and they decide that they are not going to allow people to buy domain names that relate to gambling, let's say arbitrarily. And let's say some of your customers have blogs that are about gambling. And let's say GoDaddy says, not only are we not going to allow you to do this anymore, Greg, because you violated our terms of service, and for whatever reason, we've got this big public outcry against gambling, we're going to shut your account. Well, now all of those domains that have nothing to do with gambling, you might not have access to those things. Okay. And so we see scenarios where, like an extreme scenario could be if your Parler, which, if you don't know, that was a social media network that let's just put it this way, had a very, very right-leaning bent to them. Okay. And they got repeatedly told by Amazon Web Services, you guys need to change things inside your platform. These things are a violation of our terms of service. And they didn't, and they didn't, and they didn't. And then finally Amazon just kicked them off. And there was a big stink about, well, they got deplatformed. Well, what it was is they were violating Amazon's terms of service, and they had all their eggs in the Amazon basket, and Amazon said, bye. And their business effectively went out of business overnight, you know? And so as much as possible, we've built things inside of GridPane so that you can have some servers at Vultr, you can have some servers at DO, you can have some servers at AWS, you can have servers all over the place, because the idea is that we want to make it so it doesn't matter if we get hit by a bus. It doesn't matter if huge trillion-dollar companies go to zero. Like, I don't know how Amazon would, but you're not stuck all in that one basket. Whereas if that happened and you were hosted at Pagely and for some reason AWS went down, well, all of your sites at Pagely would go down, even though you're paying them who knows what. Whereas the exact same thing just can't happen inside of our world, because we make it so that you can put all your eggs anywhere you want, and you own all of those baskets. You're not handcuffed to us in as few ways as possible.
Yeah, and the way I feel is it's a new philosophy on WordPress and website hosting, and it allows you to spread out your risk, or spread out and have multiple possible points of failure. If one thing fails, something slides, it's easy to fix that without nobody ever noticing, right? Let's just, I know we're at the top of the hour right now, Patrick. I'd love to finish by one more feature that relates to what we've been talking about that I didn't mention when I told you a couple of topics that we were going to talk about, but it really relates here. And then I'd love for you to introduce what you're doing this week with the panel plan, because of some, there was some outcry about another hosting company that sort of started to prohibit a company that they didn't own. And anyway, we'll introduce that to finish the call, but I want to just talk very briefly about snapshot failover, because it supports what we've been talking about, is having, you have a data center. A couple of years ago, OVH had a data center catch on fire and actually have like irrecoverable physical hardware somewhere in Europe, I think, right?
It was not Falkenstein, but I can't. I will mispronounce the name horribly, but it was in
Germany
France.
somewhere in France. Okay.
It was in
Well,
France. Yeah.
in any case, I just wanted to have everyone know, and I've talked about this a bit with my students. Some people on the call probably know about GridPan's snapshot failover, but let me describe real quick, and you can add in if I miss anything, Patrick. I can have a server here that has a bunch of my client sites on it, and I can set up a system called failover, meaning if this server goes down for any reason, I actually have a synchronized server over here in a different part of the world, even at a different company, that has synchronized copies of every site on the server. And I can set up the DNS with the domain name so that if that server fails, in a matter of seconds, any traffic goes to the synchronized server over here. Basically, you have a system in the background that would completely prevent any downtime, even if there were a fire or something,
Yeah.
or quake or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So interestingly enough, like when that happened, so just as an aside, if you ever get an opportunity to go into a major data center, to tour a major data center, I highly recommend it because they are amazing feats of engineering. And I've only toured one in Chicago, but some close friends of mine and actually investors in my company, they were former C-suite chief marketing officers and chief operations officers for Liquid Web, which is a very large hosting company that they helped sell into private equity for like $250 million. I was talking to the COO, and I'm like, how in the world could that even happen at OVH? Because they have so many fire suppression systems and they have so many redundant layers. It just blew my mind that this could happen. And he says, "Oh, I'll tell you exactly what happened." He's like, "There's only one way that happens, that an entire data center catches on fire like that, and it's when the main transformer in the building blows up." And so he starts describing this massive thing that's like the size of a trash truck, okay? And it's taking all the insane amounts of energy that's coming in through huge bundles of electrical wire. And then it's stepping all those things down to all of these microprocessors throughout the entire building. And he's like, when you walk, like it was the most scary part of the data center to walk by them because you can just hear all of this like energy that's just vibrating inside this thing. And he's like, it was the thing that scared me to death every single day when I was in that corner of the building, because if they blow up, they literally turn to just molten metal, and they throw molten metal 100 feet in every direction. Whoa. And he's like, I'm so surprised and very, very glad that nobody got hurt. Because literally what would have happened is no one was in that quarter of the data center just randomly walking around when that happened. And so not one single person got hurt. But if there had been anybody even remotely near it, they all would have instantly died because it's just a bomb, So anyway, setting that aside entirely,
that's crazy.
What snapshot failover does, is like you could have had servers running in that data center, and it could have been your servers that got molten lava shot on them. But you could have had another set of data centers in Germany, and instantly all of those sites would go down for a second, and then your DNS monitoring tool would say, "Oh, the site's down, but it's up in Germany," and then it would just port that traffic over immediately. Okay, and so what's really cool about the way that we've set that up is that it actually even solves for human mistakes. Like literally, you can go in and log in and knock your own website down. Okay. Now, if you had what's known as a true high availability setup, that problem would instantly propagate to the other data center. But because of the way that we've built this to have a timed window, a timed synchronization period, you might have your server over here. It might be 1 hour, 4 hours, 12 hours. It might be 24 hours behind the server that just burst into flames. And so even if you actually cause your own outage, it'll come back up, and that problem won't be replicated in the other spot. Okay. And so it's not for all use cases, but for 90+% of WordPress sites that are largely static, that don't have a ton of dynamic traffic all of the time, it's actually a better solve than true high availability, because you're literally impervious even to your own mistakes. Like you can literally melt your stuff down. You can figuratively catch yourself on fire and knock your site out, and then it'll just come back up in that other data center. And so that's actually one of the very first features that I built that ultimately started the, you know, the snowball building down the hill to become what ultimately is now hundreds and hundreds of tools all collected together.
Awesome. And let me
in
reiterate,
GridPain.
I love that. I love that tool because I don't have to understand how it works. Right? All I did was I spent 15 minutes with a knowledge base article at GridPain, and it told me step 1, go create server 1. Okay, go create server 2. I already had them created, or I had to spin up server 2. And it says, do this with your DNS, set your synchronization schedule, turn it on, all good. And it works. I get a notification when I log into GridPain. Oh, the synchronizing is happening. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and it is pretty cool. Like the nice thing, it's so funny. I always come back to this nostalgic moment of the first time that I got this working for myself. And this is even a year before I probably publicly launched GridPain. I built all of these things behind the scenes. And it was all just hackishly, you know, cobbled together. But I remember our youngest was probably 6 months old, and I was sitting at the dinner table, and my watch starts going site down, site down, site down, site down. And then I got 22 notifications, and then I got 22 more notifications right after that. Site up, site up, site up, site up, site up. And I just looked at my watch, and I saw the sites going down, and I was like, huh, I bet the Chicago data center is going down right now. And then I just kept having dinner with my family, you know? And then an hour later, I went into the Facebook group, and there's all these people like, all my sites are down. And it's like, yeah, they don't have to be, you know, like you don't have to choose to have your sites in just one data center. And it's very, very cost effective to do this on our platform. So anyway,
Thanks for that. I wanted everybody to get the kind of from the horse's mouth, the overview of what that is, because it's not really a common, you don't even see it at the major managed hosts, really.
No.
I hadn't heard of anything like this. And I was like, ooh, I need this.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff like that, you know, like we have to constantly catch ourselves. We, at least twice a year, my CTO and I will go, wait a minute, why isn't this everywhere? You know, why isn't everybody doing this? And some of the times, you know, you get another 6 weeks down the road and you burn your hands, you know, or you singe your eyebrows off and you go, oh, that's why, you know, but a lot of times we get all the way to implement it and we go, I guess we'll just have to, I guess it's just us again. You know, right. Like, I guess we'll have to go and build that thing. And you know, I don't know what that is, but it's just because we've gone so far down so many different edge cases, that we've seen so many different things that it's like, oh, that's a good idea. We should build that, or we should build that. And then we can't help ourselves generally. That's what we end up doing.
That's good for more tools. Good for me and everybody here on this call. Right. So tell me about the panel deal right now as we finish up the call. Let me describe for everybody my impression. You correct me, but I believe I have the right thing going on. Cloudways, as we mentioned before, had recently acquired one of the infrastructure providers, a big one called.
Actually, the other way around. So it was DigitalOcean.
Yeah. I already got
DigitalOcean. If you want, I'll take it. So DigitalOcean is one of the largest infrastructure providers that is not AWS and GCP. Okay, so in my definition, there's like 4 or 5 of these of what we refer to as hyperscalers. Okay, and so that's AWS, that's Google Compute Engine, that's Microsoft Azure. Okay, and then arguably you could put Oracle in there, but their market share is so small that it doesn't really count. But then below them, we have what we refer to as sort of the middle tier infrastructure providers. That's DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, UpCloud, and then there's other major providers like OVH and Hetzner. But DigitalOcean is a publicly traded company. I think that I don't remember exactly what their valuation cap is, but they're a multi-billion-dollar company, and they bought this company Cloudways last year for $350 million. Okay, so not a non-trivial sum of money. Yeah, right. And so now what they've done is they've started to make it so that new customers cannot sign up for some of the other providers that Cloudways used to natively integrate. Okay. And so DigitalOcean competes with Vultr, they compete with Linode, they compete with UpCloud. Now, if you want to spin up a new server and you're a new customer of Cloudways, you can't access those providers anymore. Okay. You can only access those providers if you're already an existing customer that already had a relationship with those providers. And their reasoning for it is clearly monetary. I get it. You know, like they have shareholders that expect a return on Wall Street. But ultimately, in my opinion, it's a really, really dumb thing that they're doing, because ultimately it negatively impacts their customers. Okay. Any which way you slice it, when you do things that negatively impact your customers, I think that that's dumb. And I think if I was the street, if I was Wall Street and could magically wave a wand, I would actually mark them down for this activity, not go, oh, good job, because you're going to make 8 cents per whatever instead of 7 cents, So it's bad for their customers, but crucially, in my opinion, it's bad for WordPress, because one of the key things, there's actually 2 key things that Vultr is doing right now better than anybody else in the entire space. One of those things is making high frequency infrastructure available to people. And I'll take just a minute to describe what that is in a second here. But what's much more important, setting that aside entirely, what they're doing faster than anybody in the space, hands down, is they're putting in new data centers, almost 1 every single month. I think 1 month they did 2 in a month, and it was like Madrid and Osaka in the exact same month. And so they just announced Tel Aviv. And so what I see happening is, again, we've got customers from all over the globe. I'm starting to become wired in with, major players in the WordPress ecosystem. For those of you that don't know, Automatic, the $8 billion parent company of all things WordPress, has invested in my company. So we've got a good finger on the pulse of the WordPress ecosystem. And where I see it growing fastest is outside of sort of the usual suspects areas where you have a lot of data center penetration already. So a lot of the growth is outside of the United States, outside of Europe. It's in Latin America, and it's in Asia Pacific. And that's where Vultr is leaning in heavily. And so these developing economies that are now starting to get on the bandwagon that we've been on with WordPress for more than 10 years, that's where the biggest growth is happening. And so to take away potential customers' ability to have access to good infrastructure in their backyard, I feel like that's an enormous disservice to their customers. And so my hope is that we're able to partner with providers like Vultr and hopefully kick them in the behind and make them regret this move. Yeah. And so for just a bit of context, the high frequency aspect of what it is that Vultr does is you can picture all of these servers, okay? Like picture these things that are the size of a refrigerator, and they're lying down a hall for hundreds of yards. Inside those servers themselves, at Vultr, more than any place else, they have these high frequency servers. And what it is it's the processors that are inside the servers, and it's the speed at which those processors can do a given amount of work. Okay. And so just to keep the math simple, you can effectively picture the average server at DigitalOcean running at 2 gigahertz and the average server at Vultr running at upwards of 5 gigahertz. And so if you had the same exact number of servers and you had the same amount of work that was being done, you can picture the DigitalOcean servers getting roughly 2 units of work done for every 5 units of work that Vultr is getting done. And so it literally is a potential 2.5 times increase in the amount of meaningful work that can get done in the exact same amount of time. And so what this actually literally translates to for your users is, let's go back to that PHP workers example again. You're logged into the site, you're making changes, your client is logged into the site, they're making changes, and then you've got customers coming and they're checking out. Well, if that checkout can happen 2.5 times faster, well, now that worker is made available that much faster back to your growing audience, okay? And so it has an enormous impact on you being able to serve concurrent traffic. And it also has an enormous impact, even just if it's only you on the website, because everything that you're doing on the server, when you go and you make a change or you install a plugin, that work is happening potentially 2.5 times faster than if you're running old, slow, crappy servers. Okay, so that's my rant about Cloudways and DigitalOcean and Vultr. And again, it's like setting all things aside, I think that what Vultr is doing is good for the wider WordPress ecosystem because they're making highly performant servers available to more disparate regions. Okay, and so that benefits WordPress, and things that benefit WordPress, in my opinion, are a net good for society.
Those things benefit us all. And so the move by DigitalOcean, who owns Cloudways now, to kind of bring everything into servers that they own and shut out the others, it's just a matter of you could see, I agree, I could see why they would do it for business reasons, but it is limiting for the end user, right? And for all of us and for the community as a whole.
Well, and it's just a net negative to the customer. You know, like you're taking away autonomy from your users, and it's like that in so many ways is what it is that we want to give people. You know, it's not just about the ability to host websites. It's not just about the ability to create these recurring revenue engines. In as many ways as possible, I don't want you to ever be able to reach out to me and say, hey, Patrick, I'm stuck. I can't do what I want to do. Like, we want you to be able to have 5 different ways to do what it is that you need to do. You know, and now if DigitalOcean's data center is down in London, you don't have another option. Okay. Whereas on GridPain, you have 5 other options. Like, if Greg comes to me and says, hey, Vultr, you know, Dallas is down, it's like, oh, well, then just spin it up on Linode, spin it up on OVH, spin it up on whatever you want. You know, like, you have no excuse but to get back to work, you know? And so I just think that it's a net negative for their users. And we see a lot of people wanting to come to us from Cloudways. And so that's why it is that we've launched this special. So obviously we do have a completely free plan. Anybody that wants to have up to 25 sites, you can have obviously up to 25 servers also. That's just the core plan, which I think if you scroll all the way down,
I wanted to share my screen.
Core.
You can start. You could see here, get started with Core, get started here, and here's the other plans. Now the panel plan has a dotted line now, I noticed. And by the way, Patrick dropped a link into the chat. If you guys didn't see that already, just goes to this pricing page. But yeah, go ahead, Patrick. Describe what you guys.
So for the first time in at least a year, we've got a sale on panel. We don't do a lot of promotions. We don't do a lot of marketing. We like for our product and for our customers to speak for us. We like our product and our support and the people that we work with to be our marketing team. And so this is the first promotion that we run on panel in, I think the last one was literally April 1st of last year. And so we've got 25% off of monthly, so down to $75.
Yeah.
And then annual is even more compelling. And this also gives you something that's crucial. When you're on monthly at $75, you're limited to 50 sites. When you go to annual, you actually get unlimited sites and servers. Okay. And so for a bunch of people that are on Cloudways that are running 100, 200 sites, a lot of them are going to be able to switch to panel, pay $600 for the year, and then pay for all of their infrastructure. And they're still probably going to save somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40% off of what it is that they're paying right now. Their performance, their capability, all of those things is at minimum going to stay the same, but in many ways it's going to get appreciably better. And again, now you have, not only you have unlimited capability of being able to pick for any provider that you want, but again, with our setup, we want you to own the relationship direct with Vultr, direct with DigitalOcean, direct with whoever it is that you want to host with. And so there's all kinds of things that you can do in GridPain that you simply cannot do at a provider like Cloudways, and definitely not like at a provider like Kinsta, because it's your server. Okay, it's literally your server. And so one of the things that we talk about, like, there was a guy who, great customer of ours, Ken's been on a couple of talks with Greg before. Ken had moved from Liquid Web to Flywheel. He moved 600 sites, I believe, and he moved those sites over to Flywheel. And then he found out that Flywheel got acquired by WP Engine. And he nearly had a heart attack and crashed his car when his employee called and told him that. But then, so he's talking to me early days of GridPaint, and he's like, "Well, Patrick, what if WP Engine acquires you?" And I'm like, "Well, that's a really good question, Ken." And we had just gone through the demo of spinning up a server inside of his account, and I'm like, "Whose server did we just spin up?" And he's like, "Mine." And I'm like, "On whose account?" And he's like, "My DigitalOcean account." And I'm like, "Yeah. So guess what? You could turn off your GridPaint account. And what would happen?" And he's like, "I'm guessing that my sites would still keep running." And I'm like, "Exactly." You know, and that's something that I end up telling every person on every single sales call that I go on, is that it's like, yeah, don't tell everybody, but literally those things are going to run potentially for years. You know, like, it's not even a matter of, well, what if? It's like, well, yeah, if we sell the WP Engine, then I wear a WP Engine hat, I guess, but nothing need happen to your stuff because it's yours. You literally own it, And so it's just that ethos of it's not as important to me that people change their hosting. It's important to me that people change their minds about hosting, which, as it turns out, is fundamentally a harder thing to do.
Yeah.
To get people to actually decide that it's like, oh, I'm going to actually think differently about things. Like, no, just move all my sites over there. Just do that instead. That'll be easier. I don't need a philosophical, overhaul. But that's what we're trying to create in a lot of ways. Is like at every tier, even at the core tier, it's like, okay, great. You don't have the money or the ambition or even the inkling that you want to have an $18,000 conversation with me. But there are people on core today that literally are scheduled to talk to me about going up to that next plan, because they've proved out their thesis, they've proved out their model, and now they're going like, oh my God, I need to scale this thing, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And yeah, I could learn, and I could take a step up, and I could take a step up, and I could take a step up, or I could just go, please just solve all of that for me, and then tell me where the bodies are buried, And so that's what we want to empower people to do, is at every stage of their journey and every budget, there's something for you, and we'll be ready for you when you cross that next bridge,
That's great, Patrick. And that illustrates really the feeling that I have as a GridPaint customer, and the funny feeling, which is like, well, GridPaint's not really a hosting company. I own my hosting servers. GridPaint gives me support, tools, an awesome server stack of software, and that interface that allows me to really easily control my own servers. I mean, if I had to go to Vultr with no other infrastructure behind me and try to set up WordPress and figure out what to do for security and how do I do back, that's definitely not something I'm going to do. And so it's a philosophical change, right? It's like GridPaint is a company that allows you to be a system administrator without going to school.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is like what we, there are people that they'll look at our thing, and then they'll look at less expensive options, or there's even things like CyberPanel, for example, it's totally open source and totally it's a good piece of software for the money, it's totally free, but none of those use cases, like none of the run clouds of the world have actually gone to the degree where we've literally gone head to head against WordPress VIP with basically, we set up a hosting service that we tested head to head against VIP. And for those that don't know, WordPress VIP is a multi-billion-dollar division within the overall Automattic brand that is just their enterprise hosting. Okay. And I think it starts at $2,000 a month, and it goes up to $45,000 a month very, very quickly for one website. Okay. And so we competed head to head against that company. And we literally were mentioned in the same breath as them, as being like, we were the second fastest and they were the third fastest, or we were the third fastest, they were the second fastest, something like that. None of these small, like dashboard solutions have actually proven out the model that you can use our stuff, and you can use our support, and you can use our team to actually do that, And then what was really cool is 2 years after we did that, one of our customers that literally is on the same tier as Greg, he did the exact same thing. And he also got mentioned in the same breath as WordPress VIP. And it was like, once we saw that, it was like, oh yeah, that's what we actually built. It's not an alternative to this, an alternative to that. It's literally, we're the first and only company in this entire space where it's like, yeah, over the last 5 years, we've invested millions of dollars and countless man hours to make it so that it's like, here's the employee manual. Here's the employee manual that makes it possible for them to go in and turn on the lights and turn on the coffee maker and start making the donuts. So if you want to own a franchise in this space, that's what we do.
Awesome.
And I want people to think that big about it, because that capability is literally at your fingertips with our stuff.
Yeah, then that's true. What's true for me, which can be true for anyone here, and anyone following Leverage WP can learn and leverage GridPane to do this kind of thing. Like I'm at a level with my web design company and consultancy that I do $5,000 to $10,000 websites all the time, and I'm totally good with that. However, if I get a $60,000 client for something that's very, very deep for an established company, I have no problem. GridPane has my back.
Yeah.
That's like it's not like I'm never going to consider when I find a client like that. I can totally serve that client at the highest level because I have all these support people and infrastructure behind me. So that's really makes me feel comfortable with GridPane.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. Is like at the higher tiers, we basically just become an extension of your team, and it's like there isn't a single edge case now. I was just realizing this. It's been true for some time, but I was just thinking about this last week, where it was like, there hasn't been a single website that we've seen in the last year that I got even remotely concerned about hosting it. Mm-hmm. Like at any scale. Like people come and they're like, "Wow, we've got a lot of traffic," and it's like, well, that means different things to different people,
right?
And then they'll show me, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And they're like, no, but really, it's 600,000 every week, and it's like, yeah, if you'd said if it was 600,000 every hour, I might have gotten interested, but you didn't, so it's totally fine. And that's the kind of capability that we want to be able to extend out to our users, is that it's like, if you get a holy cow client and you're like, I don't know what to do, well, then by all means, like, let's work on it together. Like, let me help you sell them on the idea that they should be hosting it inside of this world, and let my people worry about, how it stays up 24/7, 365. So
that's awesome. Yeah, well, Patrick, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been highly educational, I think, and I'll be sharing the recording with everyone that couldn't be on live, which there are a few that have asked me. Yeah, any final thoughts? My final thought, I would encourage you guys to, if you haven't yet, go to that GridPane pricing page and just look. There's a comparison chart that you can see on the website. And you even explore the knowledge base a little bit, and reach out to me either through the community directly in the Leverage WP Facebook group, or directly via email, which you guys are all really in touch with me, everyone that's here on the call, to ask about what's the best path forward for your specific scenario. Because I know everybody on the call here, I know I've got web designers who do sites for others, Patrick. I've got people who are learning WordPress to leverage it for their own business, and they're never going to sell a site to another client. However, there are GridPane levels and Leverage WP help that's perfect for all of that stuff. So really, I just wanted to thank you for being on. I know I went longer than an hour, guys, but thanks for being here. Patrick, highly appreciated.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, anybody here on the call here, I think we're going to run the sale. I think we're stopping at either Sunday at midnight EST my time, or Monday at midnight EST. And we haven't figured out exactly what we want to do, but if you do get in on either of the plans, monthly or annual, please do ping Shawn, SHAWN, at gridpane.com. Let him know that you were on this call here with Greg. And we'll make sure that any of the bonuses that we're going to be doing specifically for his community, we'll make sure that you get those things. And then also, even if we're not the right fit for you, but you just want to potentially level your game up, in the footer of our website, you can join our Facebook group our Facebook group as well. Tons of brilliant people in there sharing every stage of their journey, and we try to provide as much value in there as well. And so that is arguably the most valuable asset that we've actually built in the company is that community of thousands of sort of like-minded people that have already made this jump, and that can help you as you are potentially making this jump yourself. So.
Agreed. That GridPane Facebook group is an awesome resource. I think I'm in there at least every day, if not multiple times a day. Always learning good stuff, and you can ask stuff. And I mean, there's like GridPane support pros in there answering questions. It's awesome, you guys.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, read the manual, try and use the search, be respectful of other people's time. But if you've got a question about how to get started, that's a good spot to ask. So I appreciate everybody taking their time to watch this. Hopefully you got something out of it. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks, Patrick. I'm sure we did. I know there's some comments in the chat thanking us for putting out the call. I really appreciate it, Patrick. Much thanks. Have a great rest of your day. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Greg. Right. Bye-bye. Take it easy. Bye, everyone.